hand on your heart, look up at the sky, smile and say, hey, I'm alive. Thanks for being alive with me today. Hello, and welcome to Be Alive with Kate Manser. That would be me. And today I'm here to talk to you about something that makes me and possibly you feel very not alive. And that is what I call the tornado of negative thinking. So I have a lot of experience in this topic, as you may as well. And my first experience with self-directed neuroplasticity, which is the topic of today's episode, aka how to change your mind. It came when I realized several years ago that I was getting very quick to anger. I noticed that my temper was flaring very easily at increasingly small events, getting cut off in traffic, stubbing my toe. These tiny events would create this physiological response in me, of course, a mental, emotional, psychological response, but also even in my body. I would feel the anger, I would feel the rage, I would feel the temper flare up. And it was very unfun. It did not make me feel alive. And I didn't like it. And somehow I decided, I honestly don't remember how I came to this, but I came up with this idea of how I could detrain my mind from this anger response, because it was no fun getting mad all the time at pretty dumb things. So I decided that every single time something frustrating happened to me, I was going to laugh instead of get mad. And I knew that it was going to take a lot of work, but I was invested because I really didn't like getting mad all the time. I really didn't like having a temper. It didn't feel like me. It just felt heavy. I didn't like being in that angry space all the time. So thus began my journey with what I now know is called self-directed neuroplasticity. It took about a year, but over the course of a year, every single time I noticed myself get angry or my temper flare, I would force myself to laugh. And at first, it was very uncomfortable and very fake laugh. It was like I would stub my toe or drop my phone. It would be like, ha, 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 ha. But eventually, it got easier. Eventually, I noticed that things would happen. I would stub my toe or drop my phone, or I would miss an appointment or whatever. And I would just laugh, a genuine, real laugh. And the culmination of this work for me and realizing that it actually worked and I had actually retrained my mind and detrained myself out of an anger response into a humor response through just focused intention was one day. So several years ago, a year into this experiment, I was working at a yoga and meditation retreat and lodging. So I was managing this retreat and teaching yoga, and we had all of these cabins on site. And every day my job was to do a lot of computer work, interact with guests, teach yoga, teach meditation, and also just oversee all of these 25 different cabins. So I was constantly walking around the property. And I was walking around one day and I tripped over some rocks and my phone flew out of my hand. It sailed across the area and landed face down on this enormous pile of gravel that had recently been dropped off on the property. And I just genuinely started cracking up. My phone flew out of my hand, fell face down, and I'm seeing my phone. I'm on the ground. I've got gravel on my knees. I've got dust, right? I'm picking myself off the ground. And I am just genuinely thinking that this is ridiculously hilarious. It's so fucking funny that I just fell and threw my phone across the property. And it was compounded, and I knew it was really successful when I walked over to my phone, picked it up off that big pile of gravel, and the screen was shattered. And I just was like, of course, shaking my head, smiling, laughing. And I went back to my RV that I was living in on the property. And I just really had this sense of self-control, of pride, and this realization that, wow, we really can control our minds. So fast forward now to present moment. I'm doing my master's in psychology with a focus in consciousness and spirituality and transpersonal psychology. I recently had to write a paper for one of my classes called Approaches to Consciousness. And I decided to write the paper on self-directed neuroplasticity, which is what I now know I did back then when I retrained myself from anger and frustration into humor over the course of that year through focused effort to, I guess, rewire my brain. That's what I know now. I'll get back to the science, but before that, I want to tell you another story. So in 2022, I was in the deepest depression of my life. It was progressive, I would say. There were definitely some external circumstances that were causing it, but really it was my mindset. I was playing the victim. I had all of these thoughts that were just plaguing me. No one loves me. Nothing works out for me. I'm poor. I'm going to end up on the street. I'm in scarcity mode. I'm in survival mode. Nothing that I do works out. Nobody wants to buy my books or my talks or what have you. Just this constant stream of negative thoughts. And it got worse and worse and worse throughout the year. And I became into a more and more shadowy place until we reached Christmas 2022. I was the most depressed I'd ever been. As a side note, let me talk about the insidious nature, because this factors into our conversation about neuroplasticity and the fact that the more we think something, the more it gets thought. Suicidal thoughts are insidious because, at least in my experience and what I've seen in others and what I know about neuroplasticity, is that I started thinking about suicide here and there. I started thinking, oh my gosh, I want an out, started sort of fantasizing about it, started, toying with it in my mind. And it started out like, let's say once a month, and then it became once a week, and then it became once a day. And by the end of the year, at that Christmas 2022, I was thinking about unaliving myself. The thought was just washing through my mind all day, every day. That thought that I had given credence to, that I had given license to over and over, had overtaken all of the thoughts in my mind. Something happened in the midst of all of these dark, challenging thoughts. Well, a couple of things happened. I had a coach who I was crying to her on our Zoom call one day, and just, nothing, I don't know what to do. Nothing's working out. And she's from Eastern Europe. And she's like, Kate, could I tell you something? And I said, yes, tell me. And she said, you sound like a victim, Kate. You sound like a victim. This is a victim sound. Me? Victim? Excuse me? If you have a truth teller in your life, a coach, a friend, someone on TikTok, whomever, listen to them. Get them to tell the truth to you, because that truth telling, it zapped something in me. And somewhere around there, I realized, I looked somewhere around New Year's, I looked around my life, my situation, and I imagined myself in a kiddie pool. I imagined myself in a kiddie pool full of shit. And that shit had been put there by my own doing, through my victim mentality, through my negative thinking, through my choosing to see only what's wrong with my situation, choosing to only look at what's not going right, choosing to only look at how my needs are not being met and my desires and wants are not being met. I'm in this kiddie pool, right? Kiddie pools are what? 1.5 feet, 2 feet off the ground, max. You know what's really easy to get out of? A kiddie pool. And what I saw in that vision was that I was swimming around, belly on the ground, swimming around in this pool of shit. Like, help me, I can't get out. Everything is terrible. And I decided that I didn't want to swim in that pool anymore. and then I wanted to stand up and walk out. And when I stood up and I walked out, I was still covered in shit. And I continued to be covered in my own shit for years, right? It's been 2 years now. I'm sure I still got flecks of feces on me from that period in my life. I still, have bouts of negative thinking. But here's what happened. And here's what ties into this concept that we're talking about today, which is how to change your mind. I thought back to when I had retrained my mind from the anger and temper response to the humor response. And I thought, can I change my negative thought patterns? Can I just, every single time I think a negative thought, can I just immediately, as soon as I notice, pivot and replace it with a positive thought? Well, that's what I decided to do. Every single time I had a negative thought come up, and some of my negative thoughts, as I mentioned, were nobody loves me, nobody cares about me, nobody buys my shit, nothing works out for me, I'm alone, on and on. Every time one of those thoughts came up in my mind, and at first it was multiple times a day, every single day, I would replace it with the positive, optimistic analog to that thought. So if I felt myself thinking, nobody loves you, Kate, people love you. I didn't believe it at first. I kind of believed there's like a shred of me inside that believed it, but I didn't really fully oh, people love me. And then I felt that deep love. No, it was like I was sort of fooling myself. But it was like the thought comes up, nobody loves you, Kate. People love you. People love you. People love you. Okay, let's go back to typing on the computer or whatever I was doing. Same thing. Nobody buys your shit, Kate. You've sold thousands of books. You have coaching clients. You have speaking engagements. Some people buy your shit. Maybe not everybody, and maybe not all the people that you want, but some people buy your shit. So some of these thoughts are logic-based and some of them are sensation-based. Now, here's where the barge to jet ski analogy comes in. Because initially, when I started this practice of trying to rewire my brain from negative thinking to positive, optimistic thinking, it felt like I was turning the barge. Like I said, I would replace with the positive thought, and I didn't fully believe it. And it was also like, I really had to shove that thought into the positive thought into my mind. It felt like I was turning a barge. When you turn a barge in the great open ocean, this enormous seafaring vessel, it doesn't just take a right and then go to the other direction. A barge is like this big creaky thing that you have to turn, and it has to make this big wide turn. And that's what it felt like in my mind. It was like, okay, I'm going to replace this negative thought with a positive thought. Let's turn that creaky old barge in that direction. But guess what? Over time, as I kept doing that multiple times a day, every single day, every time I noticed that negative thought, any of those negative thoughts coming into my consciousness, that barge eventually turned into a jet ski. Over time. First, it was like barge, and then it was like cruise ship, and then it was yacht, and then it went to 45-foot catamaran, and then it became the jet ski. Because what I noticed is after a year, and at least for me, it seems like it takes about a year of focused effort, but when you're in the deepest depression of your life, a year ain't shit. A year is nothing. A year is the tiniest, when you almost don't want to live anymore and you feel like nobody loves you and nobody cares about you and God has forgotten about you, a year of work, would you pay that to get out of that? I would 10 times over. But a year of this self-directed neuroplasticity, a year of from barge to jet ski, changing my thought patterns. So eventually it became like the jet ski. It was like, oh, nobody loves me. People love me. And I started to feel that love. Nothing works out for me. Things do work out. It was like I started talking to that negative thinking voice, like she's a little crazy, because she is. And after that year, or throughout that year, it was a long process, my mind changed. And I can say today, I am the happiest I've ever been in my life. Back to the science. So as you may or may not know, neuroplasticity is the fact, the scientific concept that the more we think something, the more it gets thought. That our brain is constantly changing, plastic meaning molding and shifting. That our brain is constantly changing as a result of internal and external stimuli. So from our environment, from our own thought patterns, from our behaviors, from our choices. Our brain is this amazing, amazing creature, if you will, that is highly intelligent and is constantly taking in this stimuli and adjusting in response to that, which is why when we think something over and over and over, we take in that stimuli of that thing over and over and over. Our brain is going to respond, or rather adjust itself in response to that thought. And really, our brain and our whole body really craves homeostasis. And one of our body's jobs is to use the least amount of energy to achieve whatever task is set out, because, calories historically in evolution have been difficult to come by, not so much anymore. But that's our body's job, is complete the task in a very affordable manner. And so that's what our brain does. Our brain is, like I said, constantly responding in response to these internal and external stimuli. And so we dig these trenches in our brain by thinking the same thoughts over and over again. Now, we can use that to our advantage, or we can use that to our disadvantage. In 2022, I was using it to my disadvantage. I was thinking these same thoughts and they were going unchecked, such that they were continuing to propagate in my mind as my brain adapted to that state. That's where self-directed neuroplasticity comes in, also known as SDR. This is the paper that I wrote in my class. Is this concept of exerting force, our own force, self-directed initiation, self-directed intention to change the stimuli of our brain such that our brain can adapt, which essentially is replacing a negative thought pattern with a positive one and continuing to do that such that we can reprogram our minds, as I did when I was reprogramming from temper, angry to humor. And then again, far more seriously, when I was reprogramming my brain from depressed, suicidal, sad to joy, logic. That's important. I was trying to root myself in logic as much as I was trying to root myself in joy and optimism and positivity. And that a focused effort of that self-directed neuroplasticity over time resulted in me radically changing my mindset. So full stop on that. And there were other things that I did. It wasn't only the self-directed neuroplasticity. If we could just change our minds, then why wouldn't everyone do it? I actually believe that it is a very underused tactic, but I also did other things. So at the time that I was having that vision of being in the kiddie pool of shit and realizing that, I'm here because I put myself here and I finally actually want to get out. And I stepped out. In addition to beginning the practice of self-directed neuroplasticity, I did a few other things. I sought help. So I hired a therapist. I believe I started on BetterHelp and took a couple tries, but I found an amazing therapist on BetterHelp. I also started calling my friends and was really honest about the place that I was in emotionally and psychologically and spiritually so that they could be there for me and help me and just listen, maybe give a little bit of advice here and there. I also took a supplement that I swear by. I've used this multiple times in the past few years to get myself out of a dark place. It's called Solaray Joy Boost supplement. It has lithium. It has St. John's wort. It has a bunch of things that maybe created some more positive chemical balance in my brain. And that certainly helped. I also went to a meditation retreat and got really quiet and silent. But really, I honestly believe that those were supports for what I see as the pièce résistance of me getting out of that deep depression was this practice of self-directed neuroplasticity, or barge to jet ski, how to change your mind. I hope this has helped you. It profoundly helped me. I hope that if you are in a dark place, if you are struggling with feeling like you've been forgotten by God, by the people that you care about, that you feel forgotten by yourself, that you know that nothing lasts forever. That was one of the things I think that kept me in darkness was I just couldn't fathom a light. I couldn't fathom changing my mind. I couldn't fathom coming out of this darkness. I just felt like this was how it was going to be forever. And the only way out was to end my life. But now I know happiness doesn't last forever. I'm the happiest I've ever been in my life right now. Guess what? I know it's not going to last forever. There will come a time when I struggle again, when I'm back on the bathroom floor crying, when I'm in my dark night of the soul. Nothing lasts forever. You're never forgotten by God, by the universe. You might feel like it, but you're never, never forgotten. And that you have great power within you to change your mind, to reignite the light within you, to feel love again, to feel joy again. It takes work. It takes you to go out of our comfort zones, to call people, to talk to people, to tell the truth, even when it's scary. It requires us to look at the truth and look at what part of our misery is self-created. And for me, in my case, it was all of it, because now here I am a year and a half later, 2 years later, not that much has actually changed about my circumstances that I was so depressed about. I've just chosen now to look at them differently. And the barge to jet ski thing is that now I don't really need to try. Now positive thoughts and this positive sense of feeling alive and joyful and noticing the beauty of the world, it just flows through me like rain. There's this beautiful poem by Sierra de Mulder, and one of the stanzas is, "One day you will learn how to give and receive love like an open window, and it will feel like summer every day." Feels like summer for me every day now. I know it won't last forever. The darkness will come again, but I hope that I will be better equipped to appreciate the darkness. And I put my hands out because that's very important to me, is embracing the full spectrum of being alive, everything from the darkness to the light and everything in between, opening my arms to it because all of it is life. To note and remember that even in darkness, and especially in darkness, we can experience peak mystical experiences, those dark nights of the soul, the moments on the bathroom floor. Oh my God, the emotion, the aliveness in that. I hope that I'm going to be better at truth telling to myself and noticing when I'm creating my own misery. And I hope that we can all be more loving, especially toward ourselves, because I was so mean to myself. I was cruel to myself. Of course, I am not a doctor. I am an individual for whom this has worked reliably multiple times. I've also studied the science as part of my master's program, but I'm not a doctor. This is not going to work for every single person out there. And it wasn't only the self-directed neuroplasticity that impacted my depression to such a profound degree. I used multiple techniques, multiple supports, right? Interpersonal support. I tried a supplement that hopefully influenced the imbalance of my brain chemistry that probably was happening, as well as the self-directed neuroplasticity. I believe the latter to be probably the most impactful, but I don't have scientific research to back that up. However, it worked for me multiple times. There is science to back up this concept. You can Google and do your own research into self-directed neuroplasticity, or SDN. And we've heard many, many times before about how we control our reality. We control our minds, that how we choose to perceive the world is how our experience of the world is constructed. And a friend of mine a long time ago, Katrina, I'm looking at you. She had this sticker on her phone that I've just never forgotten. And on the sticker on her phone, she had written, act, don't react. And I think that really sums up well what happened in my life then. Among a lot of other things, I was just reacting. I felt helpless. I felt like a victim. I felt like everything was happening to me, and I was just reacting to my negative perception of the world and of my life. We can't just react. We have to act. We create our life. We create the conditions and the mindset that we have. And so self-directed neuroplasticity, or the barge to jet ski protocol, is a profound act. It's an act of taking control of our mind, of conditioning our reality, and of reconditioning the negative thought patterns, which I love to call the tornado or hurricane of negative thinking that can just take us away and sweep us into hell, basically. So if you need to change your mind, I hope this helps you. If you have questions, you can leave them in the comments, or you can reach out to me anytime here or on Instagram. I'm at The Alive Kate. Follow here on YouTube, follow on podcasts and Spotify and all of the places. Find me on Instagram. I want to connect with you. I want to hear your story. I want to see what we have in common and which trials and tribulations we can bond about. And thank you for listening. It's a beautiful day to be alive. The sun comes out again. Thank you for joining me for today's episode. I am honored to share this alive time with you. I'm a new show and I love your support. It helps me. It helps bring this show to others who might need this message. And, maybe it helps to buy some treats or food for pajamas along the way. So please like, subscribe, and share this episode with someone who leaves a little aliveness or a little bit of Kate Manser in their life. You never know. Lots of love to y'all. Thanks for joining me today. Until next time.